Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
Hello, gentlemen. Here we go. Off to the races on another Morgan Streetman show. And we have lots to get into. We'd love to start in the local area and talk about some of the things that are going on in our state, our Bay Area.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was something that happened here. Pat, I didn't even hear about it. You were telling us about it, or telling me about it a little bit earlier this morning. There was something that happened here locally with a semi-crash on 275 Interstate 275 North. Tell us about that, would you?
Apparently, around 4:30 this morning, a semi traveling north on 75 decided that he was going the wrong direction and decided to make a U-turn on the interstate, right where normally the highway patrol, that says, authorized vehicles only, no U-turn, the big U-turn sign there. The semi driver apparently tried to make a wide left, either from the middle lane, the right lane. I wasn't sure, but he couldn't be in the inside lane because he would have never made the turn. So apparently when he made the turn, there was a van pulling a trailer in the inside lane that hit the trailer broadside.
Oh, my gosh.
Ooh. And I saw the pictures of that. It's a big van, and it was from the bumper to about where the bench seats in the back start is where it...
Were there any fatalities? Do we know?
It has not said that yet,
Okay.
but by the looks of that van... Anybody in the front two seats are gone.
Oh, my gosh. That's terrifying. Terrifying.
Do you know what I like to say on this show? I had a friend talk to me over the weekend about Morgan Streetman. I said, there's a lot of wrinkles in the world. And on Monday, Morgan goes and irons them out.
Iron them out for you.
Right.
So you do Botox, Morgan? Is that what Pat's saying?
That's it. Right out of the back of my truck down there. Just hop on the tailgate.
Good guy to know here.
Fix you right up.
At 11 o'clock, there'll be a lot of women lined up on your truck.
Well, that's right. We already
I'm first
did.
in line. Hello.
We already did Kamala Harris. So, if you've seen the new pictures
No.
of her, the interview of her.
No.
Oh, she's looking an awful lot like the latest version of Hillary Clinton. Remember when Hillary came out with those big round cheeks?
Oh, the big cheeks.
Who is
Big
this?
chipmunk cheeks.
Kamala Harris.
Oh, yeah.
Or Kamala, however you want to say it.
Yeah, right.
Kamala, whatever. Anyway, the potential vice presidential candidate, and if it's Joe Biden wins the presidency, then the vice president will actually be the president, right? And we'll talk some about that because, Joe Biden they can't even let him out of his basement right now. And you can't blame him. No wonder they're wanting to extend the shutdown so they can try to have no public appearances for Joe Biden. They'd like him to just slide right into the presidency without having to campaign or appear anywhere in public because, if they actually let him appear somewhere, he's deteriorating so quickly. We had another local interest story that I wanted to touch on, and this one isn't, local to the Tampa Bay area, but it is local to our state and not all that far away, and that's the triple murder that occurred in Frostproof on late Friday night.
Bad one.
That sounds terrifying.
It really does sound terrifying, doesn't it? 3 young men were heading out to go fishing at, I think it's Lake Streety in Frostproof, and this is about 70 miles south of Orlando, Frostproof, Lake Wales area. And anyway, one of them apparently got to the spot where they're going to meet up and go fishing. They were going catfishing late at night. Got there early, and I don't know if some people were lying in wait for an ambush, but something happened, and then the other 2 friends, these are all young men, 30 years old and under. The youngest one was 23. So these are young guys going fishing late at night, Friday night. And so the other 2 pulled up to the scene and saw their buddy getting basically beaten very severely, bludgeoned. You can only imagine. Well, then the attackers turned on those 2 young men, and all 3 of them were brutally killed. Now, one of them is a very sad story when you really think about it. If you think about the human part of this and just what was going on, one of the young men actually had the wherewithal, was still alive, and was able to call his dad, who was not too far away, and basically was only able to say help through the phone. But the dad knew where the kids were meeting up, and I say kids, they're young men. The dad knew where the men were meeting up and going fishing, so he hurried over there in his car. Can you imagine? I'm not a parent, but can you imagine coming onto this scene for a parent?
The drive there.
Anyway, got there.
Some info.
Son was still alive somewhat. And was able to talk to his dad. Of course, then the dad realized that he had left his cell phone at home, which, you just, sad story. I'll tell you what, really sad story. So you think about the feelings this guy was feeling.
And what about Sheriff Judd?
Well, Grady Judd's always good for a press conference, isn't he? But he said this is the most brutal murder scene that he's ever seen in his time as a sheriff. So, you can only imagine what the scene looked like. And they got some information, so they're looking for multiple suspects. I don't know if they know who. They're not releasing a lot of information, as would be smart right now to not release it while they're trying to hunt these guys down.
And like you said, guys, plural. I did believe that. I heard that it was multiple people who were involved in this. Is that something you heard as well?
Yeah, multiple people supposedly. I mean, you would think they would have to be to take down that many people. I mean, 3 people at once, basically. But it sounds like some kind of execution, something that was planned. Now, question is, were they planning to get all 3 of them? Were they just going after the one who was there originally? I mean, who knows, right? And I suppose maybe we'll figure all this out. But this is a very remote area, so this is not like some people who just ran into these young men at the convenience store or something. This area is very, very remote, basically out on a clay dirt road. So it's not even a paved road going out to one of these lakes in the center of the state. So anyway, very sad story. Wanted to just bring that to you. You just never know what can happen, I guess, and particularly in today's world, where it seems like people are becoming more comfortable with getting violent with the fellow men over different things, including lately it looks like political disagreements. Now, there's no reason to think this has anything to do with that. This is probably something else.
What if we find out it was a random where he came up on possibly a drug pickup?
Possible, yeah.
And he just came into the area and they had to get rid of him.
Well,
what if we find out something like that?
That may be what we learn. I mean, it could be something like that. I mean, there's got to be something to the story here. And I guess as they try to track these guys down. And the other thing is, with all of the cell phone tracking that we have, why can't they? We know they're tracking all of us pretty much all the time.
Yeah, I always wonder that too.
Why can't they just pinpoint whose cell phones were pinging in the area? And maybe the answer is these killers didn't take their cell phones with them. I don't know. But, usually these people are not that bright. You look at the guy that, killed the guy in New York City, his boss. These people, he bought the, I don't know, did you hear that story about the young entrepreneur who got killed by his personal assistant, apparently?
And they caught him on the camera. They couldn't tell it was him because he was in this suit and he had a mask over his face, of course. That's another thing is right about now it's easier to get away with stuff because people wearing masks. It would be harder to identify. But I forget what was the big tell. There was something that made it so easy for him to get caught.
Well, he bought, this little personal assistant bought the circular saw that he was using to cut up the body with a credit card.
That's right.
So criminals are just kind of dumb. They can track that stuff very easily back to you. So anyway, but thankfully he did that, so we were able to figure out who it was very quickly and catch him.
That was gruesome.
But what a terrible, terrible thing. You just have to wonder about, what. Apparently that dispute was over $90,000. I don't know if you looked into that story at all, but it's sort of big news up in New York City right now. And of course the cities, New York and Chicago, they're dealing with the kind of a wave of violent crime right now. Before we get into some of that, because we will talk a little bit about some of that, I wanted to take a quick look back at the TikTok story. Now, one of the things that's interesting to me about this particular story is one of our listeners actually contacted me and said that they had TikTok on their phones and that they were totally unaware of this situation with the TikTok data harvesting and the data is being sent back to China. Now, here's the thing. If you just listen to what the TikTok representatives tell you, they will tell you, oh, no, we keep all the data in the United States. It never leaves the U.S. Nah. But the problem with that is those are lies. They're telling you lies. And how do you know that's a lie? Well, can't we trust them? What are you, mistrustful of the Chinese, Morgan? No, what I'm doing is I'm going off of what actual watchdogs have found, like government agencies, including our own government. But most recently, the Korea Communications Commission, KCC, kind of like our FCC, the KCC, so this is the FCC for South Korea, has decided to fine TikTok for collecting data on users under 14 years of age without their legal guardian or parents' permission. And this watchdog actually found that the data was being transferred from Korea overseas. Now, obviously, the place where it's going is China. And remember that this TikTok app collects a lot more data than just your stupid videos that you post on there. It also collects things that everything you do otherwise. It collects other data, where you are, what you're looking at. It can turn on your camera. Anytime you do a cut and paste of any kind of information, text, or anything, it gets a copy of the cut and paste. So it gets a copy of what you cut and pasted somewhere. So put on your clipboard. Anyway, they found that over 6,000 records in about 6 months were taken from people under the age of 14. And again, these records were transferred overseas. And they fined TikTok the whopping amount of approximately is about $175,000 U.S. We'll be right back. And we're back on the Morgan Streetman Show. Funny because we were sitting there talking.
Didn't even hear it happen. Didn't hear the music.
Well, we've got the music turned
There it
down
is.
in here, so we didn't know we were coming right back on. But, that first break is a short break.
Yep.
So, we'll jump right back into the social media stories, because here's another big story from last week. Twitter hack. Did you hear about the Twitter hack? Oh, this was a very interesting story. I mean, this thing went out on Twitter, which, it's kind of hard even to believe it, to be honest with you. It's kind of hard to even believe it, because you read the tweets that went out, and it's like, how could people fall for this? How could they fall for this? But Vice President Joe Biden, President Obama, both of their Twitter accounts were hacked. Jeff Bezos, the chairman of Amazon, Bill Gates, Kanye West, Mike Bloomberg, Elon Musk, and all of these folks had tweets come out of their Twitter account that said something approximating the following. Quote, "I am giving back to the community. All Bitcoin sent to the address below will be sent back doubled. If you send $1,000, I will send back $2,000. Only doing
How
this.
generous.
Only doing this for 30 minutes. And then they gave you a little address that if you're a Bitcoin person, you could send your Bitcoin to that address, right? For purposes of doubling it, right?
See, this just ruins it, because now when they're really going to do that, they're not going to want to do it, because people think it's a fake. I'm being sarcastic. They're never going to do it, okay? They're never going to do that.
What is the deal? Give me money first. It's some untraceable Bitcoin address, right? And by the way, this is really President Obama speaking. This is what I'm doing in my free time now. It's just amazing to me that people fell for this. You give me the money first to my secret Bitcoin address. You don't even know whose address that is. Just send the money to it. Don't worry, we'll send it back, and we'll double it before we send it back. Who thought this? Apparently at least $100,000 was stolen in this way in the 30 minutes or so that this little hack thing was going on, and then Twitter sort of exploded. Twitter wound up shutting down all the blue check accounts, is what I heard, at least temporarily. They went down for about a day. Nobody could access their accounts. Nobody could tweet. But you're just going, my take on it, when I heard it, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we're always talking about this economic stuff and, what the country should be doing or shouldn't be doing in terms of bailouts and free money that we seem to be getting addicted to. And my take on it is that people have gotten so used to this concept of free money being just given away. Are you kidding me? You think somebody's just going to double your money? Well, these were trustworthy people. These were leaders in the community. Wouldn't your first thought be their account must have gotten hacked?
Kanye's going to do it if he becomes president.
Well, yeah, that's right. He's going to give everybody who has a baby $1 million. Well, and that's what I say to some of these people that want to give away money with this universal.
Who's having another baby again?
That's right.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, well, you know what? You better make sure you hold off a little bit here. Make sure you time it right so you get the Kanye. You
No
were
more.
talking about
No
you.
more. I was talking about me making a joke,
Okay.
but
All right.
that ship has sailed. No.
The ship has sailed. You set the ship on fire in the harbor. Is what you did, right? Something like that. So, but no, people are getting so used to this idea, this concept of free money. Just somebody's just going to give you $1,000. In fact, the way you make your living in this life is you go around and you stack up a bunch of these instances where you get the free money. People are completely losing track of what it means to earn a living, and that's not something easy. That's not something you just do by clicking a link somewhere on a social media post. That's not how you earn a living. But in this country, that's what they're trying to switch us over to. And I view this as kind of part and parcel. I mean, not the hack itself. The hack is symptomatic of what's going on, though, with the concept of giving away money. But, when I'm talking about it, it's like, well, we're going to give everybody, $1,200. We're going to give everybody, $600 a week in extra unemployment benefits. And now they're talking about taking those away. Or we're going to give these PPP loans away, and we're not even going to make people pay them back. Okay, all right, I understand all that. I hear all that. And my question to this is, why are you being so cheap? I mean, if you can just print money up, and it really doesn't matter, and it doesn't have an effect on the economy, why aren't you doing the Kanye? Why aren't you just giving everybody $1 million every time they sneeze? I mean, why aren't we coming? I mean, why are you being so cheap? Why is it only $1,200? Why isn't it $120,000? And seriously, if you can answer that question for me, which you won't be able to do, that's the key. You won't be able to tell me why it shouldn't be more money. If this concept works logically, and you can just make things better by giving people money, by printing it out of thin air and giving it to people, give them more. But the truth is, this concept doesn't work, and what we're seeing...
It just evens out. If everybody gets the same given out, then nothing's happened. Nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed. Everybody's still got zero, even though they've got $100,000 in their pocket. $100,000 now becomes the new zero. And you look at countries where they've had this kind of runaway inflation, and you see that's what happens. People are carting around wheelbarrows full of dollar bills. And of course, that wouldn't happen in today's world in America, because I think they'll very quickly be switching us to some kind of digital currency. Very quickly, put it in 5 years maybe. We'll be switched over. You won't be allowed to use cash anymore. They'll have something about, cash can spread viruses, and, cash is a tool of criminals, and all these other things that try to destroy cash, which cash is privacy, right? That's a non-tracked financial transaction. And they don't want any non-tracked financial transactions.
Coins are disappearing.
Oh, we're having a shortage of coins all of a sudden. I mean, come on. Anyway, this is all about getting rid of cash, in my opinion. It's all about destroying the use of cash, and that's what's coming. And then we'll have no control over anything, and you'll just have a bunch of credits on your bank balance. And at the same time, and we won't say that anybody's doing this as part of a plan, a concerted effort, but at the same time, small businesses across this country are being completely destroyed by this shutdown. I think 40 or 50%, and this is a Yelp study. This is not some alarmist paper or something. I shared this with some friends of mine, and one of them kind of criticizes, says, I see that on Zero Hedge. Well, you really can't trust what Zero Hedge says. Well, yeah, you always can't until they were right 6 months ahead of time, which is what you always find out with the Zero Hedge stories. But leaving that aside, it was a Zero Hedge story that was just quoting a Yelp study, a study by Yelp, that bastion of conservative right-wing ideology, right? No, just a business, probably left-wing actually at its core. I mean, who knows? Most of these Silicon Valley companies are. But a Yelp study said that 40%, and I think they've even upped it to 50%, of the businesses with listings on Yelp are permanently closed now. They're never coming back. You're talking about little hair salons. You're talking about restaurants. You're talking about all these little businesses that people have poured their lives into that make a living for one or two people. You got the business owner or maybe 5 people. You've got some employees. And these businesses are engines of, economic activity that create wealth for the people that work there.
And that 50% that are still afloat are barely keeping their head above water.
Right. The number could go up with the new shutdowns and everything else. So what are we going to have? We're not going to have a middle class. We're not going to have a functioning entrepreneurial system where, and I'm not talking about big-time entrepreneurs like the Jeff Bezos types. That we don't need more of those, although there's nothing wrong with that. But we need mom-and-pop entrepreneurs. We need people running their own little shops, employing a couple of other people, and having that occur all over this country. That's what creates the middle class. That's what creates a broad spread of wealth for everyone. And what instead they want to switch to, it seems to me, the powers that be, I don't know, the people that seem to be in control, the big financial institutions, all the regulators, they want to eliminate small business from this country. And the coronavirus has given them the perfect excuse to do that with the shutdowns. Now, again, I'm not saying this is some kind of a part of a plan, but this is what is occurring. And so we're going to get rid of all the ability for people to make their own living, and everybody's going to get switched over to this government dole model, which is what they want. You just receive your check from the government. Now you're totally beholden to the government. It is a true nanny state from, the cradle to the grave. The state takes care of your every need. And now we're getting into the total, system of total authoritarianism, communism, where the state essentially replaces God in terms of the moral hierarchy. The state establishes morality based on what's good for the state. The state becomes the highest moral authority in life. That's the way it is in communist countries. They don't believe in God in communist countries. In fact, it's not allowed to believe in God. You're not allowed in communist countries because that undermines the authority of the state, which is all powerful. And that's what China is, right? I mean, they, it's sort of been, they've been polished up lately, China has. And it's supposed to be this, China's some new, open, vibrant society. They're showing you how to do authoritarianism right. But you know what? At their core, it's still just a communist country. Now, have they been fairly successful? Yeah, but they've been enabled by what we've been doing for 25 years. They've been totally enabled to grow with one set of rules for everybody else, and we don't apply any rules to China. We bring them into the World Trade Organization. We let them have companies over here own things in the U.S., own real estate. U.S. companies can't go own real estate in China. You can't have a business in China unless you're Chinese and sanctioned by the Chinese government. We'll be back.
We are back on the Morgan Streetman Show. Roxanne Wilder here along with Morgan and Pat George. And if you want to be part of the show, you can call 888-404-1010. We're discussing all kinds of topics from around the globe to locally, and now within our own country, we've got some things we've got to hit on.
Well, there are a number of things that we want to cover in this segment. I don't know if we'll be able to get to them all, but one of them are some new documents. Well, they're not new documents, but they are documents that are newly declassified that are coming out, and this involves the Russia investigation. And so there's a lot of new information coming out on that, and we're glad to finally see some sunlight on some of this information because it really undercuts the entire narrative that we as a country were told for over 2 years about the Russia investigation and that there was some kind of solid evidence. Remember Adam Schiff saying, you haven't seen the evidence, but I've seen the evidence, right? Because it's too highly classified for you little dummies to look at. That's the messaging. It's national security. Well, what comes out is that now when you get behind the redactions and you get the classified documents now declassified and released, you find out that they knew 100% that the investigation was false, that it was a hoax, that there was no collusion with the Russians and the Trump campaign. No conspiracy, no coordination, no collusion, no nothing. Nothing. Now, here's one of the documents that came out, which I think is very, very interesting because it's an analysis of a New York Times article. So for all of you who listen to what the New York Times has to say ever, or any of these other papers, the Washington Post and others, I mean, you really got to take this stuff with a grain of sand. Their track record is terrible. So I get sick of people telling me, well, look at this, look what's going on with the coronavirus, and you give me some New York Times article. I mean, we might want to save that, put that in the bathroom and use that for paper. I mean, that's about what that's worth.
In your hamster cage.
In the hamster cage. There you go. That's a better mental picture. Put it in the hamster cage. Anyway, it's BS. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it. Obviously, I didn't think of a very pleasant way there, but it's complete BS.
If something's completely erroneous and you have to come back and say, okay, this was wrong, we made a mistake, I could stomach that a little bit more, but it's just kind of swept under the rug.
They never own up to it.
Right, exactly. So there's never that post-discussion of, hey, what did we get right?
Yeah, the New York Times never comes out and says, hey, we've looked at some of our past reporting and all this stuff was false. There was an article in the Times called Trump Campaign Aides Had Repeated Contact with Russian Intelligence. That's the headline. Trump campaign aides had repeated contact with Russian intelligence. Now, here's the claim from the article, and there's going to be a bunch of them. Here's one claim. Phone records and intercepted calls show that members of Donald J. Trump's presidential campaign and other Trump associates had repeated contacts with senior Russian intelligence officials in the year before the election, according to 4 current and former American officials. Now, Peter Strzok is, by the way, no fan of Donald Trump. If you don't remember that name, Peter Strzok was one of the lovebirds, right, who were creating the insurance policy in Andy's office, Andrew McCabe. It's been admitted that's Andrew McCabe, where they created the insurance policy that was the Russian investigation. But he took that quote I just read for you, and he made a comment on it. And this is in a memo, an internal memo that he wrote that was only just recently declassified. He said, "This statement is misleading and inaccurate as written. We have not seen evidence of any individuals in contact with Russians, both government and non-governmental." That's a quote. Another quote, "There is no known intel affiliation and little, if any, affiliation with the government of Russia. The FBI investigation has shown past contact between Carter Page," remember that name, Carter Page, "and the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, but not during his association with the Trump campaign." Well, we all knew that Carter Page was a U.S. agent. He was assisting U.S. authorities with investigating Russian intelligence and had contact with Russian intelligence for purposes of assisting the U.S. authorities. So there was no contact during the Trump campaign. That's what Peter Strzok is saying. And believe me, if there was contact, he'd be hollering it from the rooftops. What he's trying to do here, he's trying to say, I don't know who leaked this story to the New York Times, but, you really got a lot of things wrong, and you're possibly setting us up for the big reveal, the big fail. And that's just coming true today in the summer of 2020 that we're actually finding this out. This stuff occurred back in late 2016 and early 2017. And we're just now learning about it. A lot of us knew this just because we just went with our gut. We used our common sense, and we looked at all of the other evidence that is available to us, and we knew that this kind of stuff was going on. But now we're getting document after document showing us that 100% we were right, that this Russia investigation was a total hoax. Here's another claim from the New York Times article. I'm quoting again. "One of the advisors picked up on the intercepted calls was Paul Manafort, who was Mr. Trump's campaign chairman for several months." Now, here's Peter Strzok's response. Quote, "We are unaware of any calls with any Russian government official in which Manafort was a party." So that's just completely false. Whoever these American officials were, these 4 American officials, high-ranking American officials, have told the New York Times, well, either the New York Times completely made it up or the officials gave them bad information and it was a lie. And that's what Peter Strzok said then, and they've known this. That's what I'm saying. They knew. If Peter Strzok wrote this memo way back when, they already knew this. The FBI already knew there was no contact, no collusion, no conspiracy, nothing between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Okay, here's another one. The FBI has obtained banking and travel records. This would be related to the Russian collusion. Now, Strzok's comment, "We do not yet have detailed banking records." Here's another claim in the New York Times article. Quoting again, "Officials would not disclose many details, including what was discussed on the calls and how many of Trump's advisors were talking to the Russians," because we know it was a bunch. We just couldn't figure out exactly how many. By the way, that last part was not part of the quote. That's Morgan speaking in the guise of the person writing the quote. But here's Strzok again. Strzok's quoting, I'm quoting him, "Again, we are unaware of any Trump advisors engaging in conversations with Russian intel officials. Our coverage has not revealed contact between Russian intelligence officers and the Trump team." And it just kind of goes on and on. Now, there are, I'm going to say there were probably, 10 or 12 different points in this article that Peter Strzok pulls out, quotes, and then writes his own little response saying, hey, this is not true. And you can go out there and find this analysis yourself. I think we've given you enough of a flavor for it. There's a lot more where that came from. It's more of the same. The point is the New York Times, knowingly or unknowingly, was lying to us. And they never came back. And what makes you think maybe it was knowingly? They never came back and corrected their story. They're not doing a big expose now of how we got it so wrong, how U.S. officials misled us so completely. They're not doing that because they weren't misled. They were part and parcel of a team to push out these negative Trump stories, create enough smoke out there so people would say, as many people have done, well, with this much smoke, there's got to be some fire somewhere. I mean, there's got to be something going on. I've had people tell me that. I mean, come on, Morgan, this particular one point that you've disproved, that's 1 point. But, Donald Trump would never have been where he was if he wasn't so tied in with the Russians. And I'm just going, well, wait a minute. What's the evidence for that? It doesn't make any sense to me. Could you give me one piece of evidence? Give me an example. And then you just say, look, just read the newspaper, Morgan. My goodness, there have been hundreds of articles in the New York Times and the Washington Post about this. You're obviously not very well informed, sir. This is the response I would get from people and have gotten from people. And, again, is anybody going to stop and take a minute and reevaluate how we got here? And
Morgan, you're not paying attention.
Exactly. I'm not paying enough attention.
A lie told often enough.
There you go. Becomes the truth, right? That's the old propagandist tool. So, and we've got a lot of lies now, and it's sad that our media is basically the mouthpiece for lies now. It's shocking. Now, with the time we got left in this segment, I did want to see if we could cover a few other things. You see, I've only got, a page and a half.
Pages of notes, the work Morgan does to ramp up. Yes.
Well, we'll see if we can get through it all. There was something, though, that is worth at least referring to, because we've got an ongoing communist Marxist revolution going on in this country right now. And it's a sad story, and people are being canceled for saying what I'm saying right now. Prominent people, we've shared some of them with you. People have been fired. Police chiefs of colleges have been fired. Deans of schools of nursing have been fired, just for trying to stand up against this movement, which is a communist movement, a communist revolution, and we've described it to you before on this show. But we can't be silent here. We can't just let them scare us into silence, because then they're going to win. And they're fighting very hard. We've got to fight back. How do we fight back? We spread information. We spread truth. We share information with you, the listener, and hopefully you go out and do some of your own research based on some of the things that we're sharing with you. And I'll tell you, there's been a couple of these leaders of this movement. These are not as savory of people as you might think. And a couple of them have been busted recently. In fact, one in Washington, a BLM leader named Henry Washington, in Bothell, Washington, apparently shot, and this is what's alleged, because at this point it hasn't been proven, but they have good reason to believe, apparently, that he shot 2 police officers, and I believe they've taken him into custody now. One of the police officers was killed. There was also a child shot in this altercation with the police, execution-style altercation, which we're seeing more and more around our country. We're seeing police officers attacked and even executed, being called to neighborhoods on false calls. We've had that happen here in Tampa. They would get called to a neighborhood and people start attacking them. Look at what was going on in Chicago over the weekend. It's unbelievable. You got to go out and watch these videos where the crowd is attacking the police officers at the Columbus statue. If you didn't see this, you got to go and watch this video. This crowd is super violent. Now, they call this peaceful protests. You can't be peaceful throwing incendiary bombs at police officers, throwing full water bottles, literally fighting with them hand and fist. And, these police officers are just surrounding the statue inside of about a 4-foot wall. And, they're just under total assault. How do we allow this to go on in this country? Pat's pulling up the video of it now. But how do we allow this to go on in this country? Where are the rest of the police officers? Why isn't the mayor sending in the SWAT to disperse that violent riot? It's a riot. It's not a peaceful protest. We had another BLM organizer up in New Hampshire get charged with 6 counts of child abuse images, and he had apparently 60 images on his phone. Meanwhile, in Portland, the Oregon Attorney General is talking about suing DHS for sending their special police force onto the streets to round some of these people up. Where are the priorities? Why aren't they breaking up these riots? Where are the priorities of the law enforcement officials?
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show, getting ready to go out there. We've got a couple out there stops. I just want to mention one quick thing, Morgan. When we were talking earlier about this violence, the clash with police and the violence that ensues, I do think one thing we need to do as citizens, as Americans, pay attention to your daily interactions with people, because those will be a lot better than what you see on TV. Those are the outliers. So when you base what the world is like on these stories, and you don't give enough credence to what's happening when you meet certain people on the street, in business, you're doing a disservice to yourself.
Well, definitely. And, one of the things you notice about these protests and these riots, and there we go again with the naming of them. Are they peaceful protests? Are they riots, et cetera? Well, I'd say anytime you're firebombing the police, it's a riot. But they're occurring in the cities, if you notice the pattern. They're occurring in the big cities. And it seems to be in the big cities where there's some of these, dominant cultures of Marxism and communism. And, that's been the case for 100 years, so it shouldn't be a surprise. It basically got its start in New York City, so, about 100 years ago or even more. So these things are not a surprise. But going on with some of the leadership also of the movement, I don't know if you've seen this lady, Susan Rosenberg, who's part of the Thousand Currents charity, but they are the charity that supposedly manages donations for the BLM groups. And there's a number of different affiliated groups that make up that culture, that movement. And anyway, Susan Rosenberg, who's the vice chair of Thousand Currents charity program, is a convicted terrorist. And, of course, she was serving 50-something years in prison for bombings that she carried out in New York City and Washington, D.C. back in the early 80s as part of the Weather Underground groups, the March 19th or maybe May 19th communist movement. And they've got all these different names for their movements, but they're all affiliated with each other fighting this revolutionary struggle. So she was blowing up government buildings and was apparently part potentially of the Brinks robbery where a Brinks guard and a police officer was shot and killed. This all happened back in the early 80s, that this sort of, attempt at communist revolution was going on at the time. And, of course, Bill Clinton pardoned her. Why? Who even knows, right? It doesn't make any sense, does it? Anyway, he pardoned her, and now she's out and about, and she's running the charity arm of the BLM movement. So you should look into that. Susan Rosenberg. And what's her role in this Marxist revolution that's going on in our country? And you got guys like Joe Biden sneaking in little quotes of Mao Zedong, the great leader, the founder of the Chinese Communist Party. He's at a digital fundraiser with Valerie Jarrett, if you remember her from the Obama administration, kind of one of Obama's watchers, overlords, people who were very important in his administration. And Joe Biden says he was going to quote an old Chinese proverb. Well, it's not really an old Chinese proverb. It's a quote from Mao Zedong. But anyway, the quote was, "Women hold up half the sky." Now, you don't think that was intentionally slipped in there to show solidarity with the communist movement? I guarantee you, first of all, Biden didn't write any part of the speech that he's reading on the teleprompter. And I guarantee you that was slipped in there by his advisors for purposes, that's a secret message to people like Susan Rosenberg. Hey, we're on your side. Vote for Joe Biden, and we'll keep this revolution moving. We'll move it in the right direction. Progress. We'll move it forward. Another aspect of this revolution is the control they've taken over some of our cultural institutions. And we won't have time to read all this to you because but you got to go out there and find it on your own. Now, they've taken this off the web now. The National Museum for African American History and Culture had a graphic up on their website that they've now removed, and they admit to it. It's on the website. They say we took that down because basically it was generating too much controversy. And the graphic is talking about race, aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States. Now, I'm quoting now, white dominant culture or whiteness refers to the ways white people and their traditions, attitudes, and ways of life have been normalized over time and are now considered standard practices in the United States. And since white people still hold most of the institutional power in America, we've all internalized some aspects of white culture, including people of color. And then it goes through, and it's like 3 pages of stuff that makes up what they say is this is what whiteness is, right? So things like self-reliance. Self-reliance is whiteness. Independence and autonomy are highly valued and rewarded. The nuclear family, a father, a mother, and 2.3 children, is the ideal social unit. Objective, rational, linear thinking, that's white. Objective, rational, linear thinking. Cause and effect relationships. Quantitative emphasis. The scientific method. That's white thinking. According to this chart, and did you see what they're doing to us here? Do you see this? This is identity politics through and through. It's critical race theory. It's intersectionality. It's all of these Marxist thought processes and ways of describing the world that have sprung up and gained a foothold and basically taken over our academic institutions to where this is the only thing that's taught anymore in our academic institutions. And it's all about breaking people down and pitting them against each other based on the color of their skin. This is not getting beyond racism. This is diving headlong into racism of all kinds.
Thank you, Nick Cannon.
It's terrible what's going on with our country. But anyway, this is a national institution. I mean, they're affiliated with the Smithsonian. And they're putting stuff like this out. By the way, this graphic was written in 1990. Some of the other information, you can go on their own website. They haven't taken everything down. Some of the other stuff they're linking to, talking about the troubles with whiteness. I read one other paper that was written in 1988. I mean, talk about some old information they're spreading here. You know, if these were problems back then, okay, that's one thing, but this is not the status of our country now. There's a lot more to read on that graphic. You really got to go out there and read it. The thing that struck me about self-reliance is just how silly it is to say that self-reliance is something that we all, people of all races, colors, creeds, nationalities, backgrounds, shouldn't be in favor of self-reliance. I mean, if we're all dependents, who are we dependent on? You better have some self-reliant people out there to produce something, or the dependents aren't going to have anything to eat, as that happens in every communist country. The dependents don't have anything to eat. Well, that was pretty out there, I have to say. If you read that graphic, it's out there. We don't really have time to talk about our other out there story, but we'll mention it to you just so you know we didn't miss it, and you may want to go out there and do a little research of your own, and that is the Wayfair child trafficking story. Really strange little rabbit hole you can go down there, where they've got cabinets that they're selling on Wayfair that appear pretty nondescript, and they're selling them for $10,000 or $15,000. And oh, by the way, the name in the description tends to have a name of somebody who's listed as a missing child. And so people on the internet are saying, you know, this is some kind of secret child trafficking that's going on through the Wayfair site. I mean, you really got to go look at this if you enjoy going down rabbit holes, and we all do on the Morgan Streetman Show. So have fun with that. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.